Mark chapter 11. Begin reading with verse 12. And on the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, unto the fig tree, No man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And his disciples heard it. And they came to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple, and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves. And he would not suffer or permit that any man should carry any vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer? But ye have made it a den of thieves. And the scribes and chief priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy him. For they heard him, because all the people was astonished at his doctrine. And when even was come, he went out of the city. And in the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. And Jesus answering saith unto them, Have faith in God. Again, this is an event that transpired before what we saw this morning in John chapter 12, but this was not recorded by John. At the beginning of this chapter, Jesus and the apostles are on their way to Jerusalem. In verse 1, they come nigh unto Jerusalem. And then we are told of two towns, Bethpage and Bethany. Now from John 11, verse 18, we know that Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem about 15 furlongs, about 2 miles. Matthew records in Matthew 21:1, And when they drew nigh unto Jerusalem and were come to Bethpage. The town of Bethpage was just short of a mile from Jerusalem. And it was here that Jesus would send 2 of his disciples into the village with specific instruction. We see that in Mark 11, verses 2 and 3, concerning a colt that they were to bring to Christ. And then their obedience is recorded in verses 4 through 6. And in verse 7 we read, And they brought the colt to Jesus, and cast their garments on him, and he sat upon him. Jesus would then, verses 8 through 10, ride that donkey into Jerusalem. Religious hypocrisy, spiritual emptiness lined the streets that day as they shouted Hosanna to the King. They were dreaming of an earthly kingdom, and they were enthused and excited when Jesus came to Jerusalem. Some would go before him, some would follow after, shouting Hosanna or Hallelujah. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Now many of these who were so filled with enthusiasm and excitement in just a few days, with even a more feverish pitch, would be shouting, Crucify him, crucify him. So what lined the streets that day, for the most part, was spiritual emptiness, a mere form of religion, a mere shadow of the real thing. In verse 11, Jesus and the apostles arrive in Jerusalem. And they go into the temple. And it says, He looked round about upon all things. And as He looked, He would see spiritual emptiness. He would see formality and shadow of the real thing. We then read in verse 11 that when the eventide, start of the evening, which is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, was come, He went out unto Bethany. Remember, Bethany is about 2 miles away, with the 12. Matthew records in Matthew 21:17, and He lodged there, probably with Lazarus and his sisters, Martha and Mary. And then coming to our text, verse 12, we read on the morrow, so it's now the next day, when they were come from Bethany. So they're heading back to Jerusalem. Matthew writes, Matthew 21:18, now in the morning has He returned into the city. So on their way to Jerusalem again, and in process, we read concerning Christ, He was hungry. And in verse 13, He sees a fig tree in the distance. The fig tree was full of foliage. But when Jesus walked with His apostles over to the tree to gather some figs, it says He found nothing but leaves. Nothing but leaves. I believe that's very significant. Christ then pronounced a curse upon that tree. And in verse 14, and His disciples heard it. They were meant to hear it. But it is recorded, and His disciples heard it. The next thing we read of is their arrival again into the temple. And Jesus, seeing the spiritual hypocrisy and the emptiness of mere religion that was everywhere in the temple, He overturns the tables and rebukes them in verses 15 through 17. The effect that this had upon the religious hypocrites is recorded there in verse 18. And the scribes and chief priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy Him. For they feared Him, because all the people was astonished at His doctrine or teaching. And then in verse 19, Jesus and the apostles leave the temple. And they again come to the place of the fig tree. Verses 20 through 22. And what Jesus said here is in direct relation to that withered, shriveled, dried up fig tree. There in verses 20 through 22. He said, have faith in God. Have faith in God. Now you remember what follows this from this morning. Jesus was telling them that they need to see Christ by faith. Before that, He tells them here, have faith in God. And I believe, again, the disciples heard it. He wants the disciples to hear it. Jesus is telling them how not to become this fig tree. Have faith in God. So our subject is overcoming a mere religion. So let's consider the teaching of the fig tree. I believe the fig tree represents hypocritical and empty religion, what Jesus was going to experience in the temple. The Jews, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the other religious sects of Christ's day, they all had an abundance of religious ceremony They all had their creed. They all had their doctrine. They all had their tradition and their show. And they all had a reputation. They all had religious procedures, religious steps, religious formulas. They had a long and passed down history of religion. They were a religious people. And they had a display of religion. They weren't ashamed to display their religion. But in verse 13, they are like that fig tree, having leaves, nothing but leaves. They're rich in the leaves of formality, rich in the leaves of appearance, but barren of the real thing. They had all the outward frills and ornamentations. They had a form that is a semblance of godliness without the power, without any real influence and impact upon the heart. They had a mere surface religion. They knew theory. They had religious opinion. They had no substance. What they had was a religion that was void of God. In other words, what they had was man-made, man-manufactured, man-produced, the product of their own heart and mind. Therefore, their religion was ungodly, was unholy, it was profane, it was sinful, it was erroneous, it was corrupt, it was blasphemous, and it was displeasing to the Lord. Their so-called spirituality was a sham and a complete failure. The mere leaves of religion will not satisfy the truly hungry. Jesus hungered, and that tree could not satisfy his hunger. Again, they're like that fig tree, having leaves, nothing but leaves. A brief outward appearance of fruit, but in reality, nothing but leaves. And such did not and does not satisfy Christ. In fact, it was so offensive to him that he cursed, put a curse upon that fig tree. Again, verse 13, having leaves, nothing but leaves. A picture of the religion of Jerusalem in that day. Empty, a mere appearance, a mere form, but nothing. And in verse 20, we see that the fig tree dried, dehydrated from the roots. It is a religion that goes all the way down to the root system. And it's dehydrated. There's a problem with the entire system. Having leaves, nothing but leaves. And Jesus cursed. Put a curse upon that fig tree. God has always, and certainly it was manifest in the ministry of Christ, had a conflict with mere religion. He still does. Let's go over to Isaiah chapter 1. And listen to what God said to His own people through Isaiah. Again, reading in verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord, ye rulers of Sodom Give ear unto the law of our God, ye people of Gomorrah. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me, saith the Lord? That's a good question to ask ourselves. To what purpose? Why am I doing this? I am full of the burnt offerings, of rams and the fat and fed beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of goats. When ye come to appear before me, who hath required this at your hand to tread my courts? Bring no more vain oblations. That is, stop it. Stop. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. In other words, I don't want any of it. It is iniquity. Even the solemn meeting, even your most spiritual meeting, your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hateth. They are a trouble unto me. I am weary to bear them. And when you spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. And then he challenged them to cleanse themselves. But reading those verses, he mentions the sacrifices. And the sacrifices which are here declared to be useless were appointed by God Himself. The feast, which He says He hates, had been prescribed by Him. But when the very things of God, the very things in which God has prescribed are used formally and without heart, they're worse than useless. They're offensive to Him. It wasn't the problem with the sacrifice of feast. The problem is with the people who offered them. Notice in Isaiah 29. Isaiah 29. God again speaks. Verse 13. Wherefore the Lord said, forasmuch as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, that is, it all looks good, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Though they went through the outward formality of worship, there was an estrangement and detachment from God. And Christ would use these very words of Isaiah in reference to the religious crowd of His day, there in Matthew chapter 15, verses 8 and 9. And Jesus constantly rebuked and challenged the entrenched position of the established religion of His day. He looked upon it as a failure. He looked upon it as a hindrance to true spirituality. And in Matthew 23, we see Jesus repeatedly denouncing formalism and hypocrisy of the scribes and Pharisees by saying, woe unto you, over and over. And if Jesus Christ were to walk our streets on any given Lord's Day and looked at the fine church buildings and heard the singing and listened to the sermons and observed the people, I believe that those words would still apply. Woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. So it brings us to this fig tree, having leaves, nothing but leaves. It's a picture. It's a picture of the hypocritical, formal, fruitless, barren religion of the day. The fig tree dried up from the roots. The fig tree withered away is a picture of the results of such a religion. It's cursed and unacceptable to God. So in light of that, verse 20, Jesus and the apostles, again, they come to the fig tree. And it's dried up from the roots. Peter, seeing the fig tree and remembering Christ's words the first time they came to the fig tree, said, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. Jesus' response. Jesus answering saith unto them, the apostles. It's in response to Peter's observation. He says, have faith in God. Have faith in God. Again, these words are spoken in the context of the fig tree dried up from the roots. The fig tree withered away. It is a terrible thing to be weighted down with a religion that does not work. That's a terrible thing. That's an enslavement. A religion that does not produce love, joy, and peace, but instead it produces tension, anxiety, and fear. A religion that is detached from God. You look around, there are many people in our fellowship, other fellowships as well, that their lives, they have religious appearance, they have righteous appearance. Their lives are not marked by love, joy, and peace. Their lives are marked by tension, anxiety, and fear. Why is that? Because they have a religion. And they have a religion that does not work. They don't have the real thing. How do we escape that? Because we can fall into it. How do we escape it? Well, Jesus says, have faith in God. 4 words. Have faith in God. This is the way to avoid, to escape meaningless, vain, futile, ineffective, inconsequential religion. If you're going to escape what the fig tree represents, have faith in God. So what does that mean? Have faith in God. Everyone here needs to be sure that we have salvation and not mere religion. We need to be certain of that. And we that are saved need to be aware of the danger, how easy it is to slip into mere religious practices, religious appearance and form. So, Peter says, Master, behold the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. And Jesus in response says, have faith in God. So what does that mean? Well, it means that God has to be the focus. It means everything we said in the first message. You have to see Him. To have faith in God means that God is the central focus. In light of spiritual emptiness and formality, He is declaring the way to avoid becoming merely religious is have faith in God. With those words, he's calling our attention to God. Have faith in God. That is a call to attention to God, to pay attention to God. He is the central focus of those words. Have faith in God. For spirituality to amount to anything, it cannot be void of God. If it's void of God, it's religion, and it doesn't work. In order for it to be reality, rather than appearance, rather than mere form, it cannot be detached from God. It cannot be disinterested in God. Have faith in God. You can't do that if you are disinterested in God. And there are people flooding into religious buildings on the Lord's Day who have no interest whatsoever in God. None. That's religion. That's religion. And where there is interest, that's as far as it goes many times. There's no commitment. Have faith in God. Why is it that so many people who attend religious assemblies, they get mad when God is preached? Because they're not interested. They're not interested in God. They have a religion detached from God. That's a worthless religion. It's useless. Have faith in God. With those words, he draws our attention to the very fact of God. In considering the fact of God, we are brought face to face who He is. And in most religious circles today, people are not interested in who God is. In fact, it offends them if you preach who God is. They're not interested. They're interested in other things. We're brought face to face with His greatness. Have faith in God. And the greatness of God is something that needs to lay hold of us. The Bible speaks of the majesty and the grandeur and the dignity and the loftiness of God. And Jesus says very plainly and very directly, have faith in God. I know it to be so. On many occasions you tell somebody, trust God. They get mad. They get upset. Have faith in God. Keep God in view. That's what it means, have faith in God. Because faith sees. Keep God in view. Keep in view the fact that He's God. That He's absolute, that He's sovereign. That He has control of all people, all things, all circumstances. And this sovereignty is absolute, it's irresistible, it's infinite. Don't lose sight of God. Because if you do, you will be the fig tree. Leaves, but nothing but leaves. He's the Most High. He's the Almighty. He's the always able one, the one who can. He's all-knowing, past, present, and future. He's the unchanging one. On and on we can go. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Have faith in God. That is, recognize and acknowledge God. You can't have faith in God if you don't recognize God. You cannot have faith in God if you don't acknowledge God. Have faith in God. But this is a religious system that is disinterested. That is disinterested. That's why so many religious organizations today are market-driven, because they even know that the people they're dealing with have no interest in spiritual things. So if we're going to keep them, we've got to offer something else. And it's just mere religion. That's all it is. Have faith in God. That means always be mindful of Him. That's how you avoid becoming this fig tree. That's how you avoid falling into the trap of a mere religion. Be mindful of Him. Again, as we've said many times, it means think God. Think God. In all your opinions, think God. Do not remove God from the equation. Have faith in God. If we're going to rise above the spiritual emptiness that's everywhere, the spiritual formality of mere religion, and above religious theory and that which is meaningless, we must keep God in view. We must think God. We must beware of a religion or a creed or a worship or a tradition that is void of the reality of God. We need to make personal examination. Have faith in God means not only to keep God in view, but it's a connection to God. You can't have faith in God and be disconnected from God. It's a connection to God. There's a lot of religion today that has no connection to God whatsoever. Have faith in God. Have faith in God. That needs to grip our hearts. It is present tense, and it is continuous action. Have faith in God. Now, I don't believe that Jesus is merely saying, believe that there is a God. No, it's much more than that. Have faith in God. Almost everyone who attends religious services believes that there is a God. That doesn't save them. So what he's saying here is more than just believe there is a God. It's something more than just giving mental assent to the fact of God. Have faith in God. What he's saying is, recognize and acknowledge God in all things. Believe God. A lot of people believe in a God, but they don't believe God. Be in agreement with God. That's what it means to believe Him. To be in agreement with God. Be firmly persuaded in God. Have full confidence in God. Depend upon God. Have unreserved trust in God. Be committed to God. Surrender to God. Lean upon God. Rest upon God. Cleave to God. Look to God. Turn and flee to God. Cast yourself upon Him. Embrace Him. Live in the reality of God. That's what it means to have faith in God. Otherwise, it's just religion. And it doesn't work. Have faith in God works. It works. So we need to hear those words, have faith in God. That is, be continually gripped by who and what God is. And if I am gripped by who and what God is, I don't get offended by someone preaching God, who God is. But all over the religious crowd becomes offended in hearing who God is. They don't want to hear it. Have faith in God. Those words are spoken without any stipulation whatsoever. It is just have faith in God. No matter what a day may bring forth, have faith in God. That is, no matter what a day may bring forth, stay connected to God. That'll keep you from falling into just mere religion. Have faith in God. That keeps us near to God. You can't have faith in God going the opposite direction of God. Have faith in God. That makes the invisible visible. That gives you stability. That enables you to stand. Have faith in God. It gives courage for God's cause. It gives resolve and determination and perseverance and endurance. Have faith in God. It will keep you near Him. Again, faith doesn't withdraw from God. Faith goes to God. Have faith in God will keep your heart tender. Your heart grows hard, you've lost sight of God. You may not want to admit it, but that's the truth every single time. If your heart grows hard and unresponsive to Him, there's a faith problem. Have faith in God. That keeps our mind upon Him. That keeps our feet following Him. Have faith in God. That'll keep you praying. It'll keep you in His Word. It'll keep you from sin. And it'll give you strength. And it'll give you comfort and joy and peace. Empty religion doesn't have that. Have faith in God. That gives you conviction. That gives you passion. That gives you assurance and estrangement. Those of God's people who have lost conviction and passion and assurance, it's a faith problem. And they've fallen into mere religion. Have faith in God. That fills your life with power and vitality. Keeps you from becoming discouraged to the point of quitting and restless and hopeless and joyless and spiritually numb and spiritually exasperated. Have faith in God. That'll keep you from a life of wandering. It'll keep you from a life of emptiness and a life of defeat. Have faith in God. But today, someone gets upset because brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so said such and such or didn't say such and such, or I knew what they meant when they said such and such. You tell that person, have faith in God. You want to see a fit? I'm telling you, almost every time. They're not interested. They're not interested in God. It's all about self. And they spend their life wandering. But have faith in God will spare you from a life of wandering. It will shape your thinking. It's unbelievable, the thought process of many of God's people. I mean, it's just almost beyond belief. Have faith in God will shape your thinking. It'll shape your viewpoints. It'll shape your attitudes toward everything. It'll keep you from being taken in and consumed by the influence of the world and the life that's all around us. It'll keep us from getting stuck and defined by the carnal. Have faith in God. That'll keep you from becoming spiritually depleted. It'll keep you from self-indulgence. It'll keep you from being mastered and controlled and governed by the things of life. Have faith in God. This is a faith that impacts every area and phase of our lives. It is a faith that enables us to see, feel, and experience Him more and more. It is a faith that enables us to draw from Him. Have faith in God means you draw from Him. You're not depleted by the people who have no interest in God but wear their religious cloak. You draw from Him. You draw strength from Him. Causes us to be occupied with God. All the things that God's people are occupied with. Have faith in God. Causes us to be occupied with God. A faith that keeps this world from being our home. The world will never become your home if you have faith in God. A faith that lessens our attachment to the world. We should be becoming less and less attached to this world, to this life. A faith that keeps us from being weighted down with the things and pursuits of the world. A faith that will raise us above and cause us to resist the pull of the world. It is a faith that will cause us to have joy in the very midst of calamity, in the very midst of sorrow and trial. Have faith in God. The apostles were about to experience the crucifixion. They were about to hear, "Crucify Him, crucify Him." Have faith in God. Jesus is instructing them. Have faith in God. It's this faith that will cause us to worship and praise and serve Him and fellowship with Him, regardless of circumstances. I've known people all my life, and you have too. Their lives are absolutely under the control of circumstances. And you've observed them long enough, you know that when adverse circumstances come into their lives, they won't be here. They need comfort, but they don't come to the place where they can get comfort. It is a faith that will cause us to excel and go further and further and further. Each and every day we ought to be going a little bit further. A little bit further for God. Which brings us a little bit further from this world. Have faith in God. This is a call. If we're not going to fall into the trap of mere religion, we must have faith in God. A call for God to be the central focus. A call for a continual personal connection to Him. That's how we avoid spiritual emptiness, spiritual formality, and that which is merely surface. Have faith in God. That's how we prevent, that's how we avoid a meaningless, ineffective form of spirituality. Have faith in God. That's how to prevent spiritual dehydration. That's how to blossom spiritually. That's how to keep it real. It's very easy to fall into a place where what we believe, nothing wrong with what we believe, that's Scripture. But it's very easy to fall into a place where it's not real. Where it's not real. That's religion. That's all it is. It's meaningless. It's not going to help you get through life. And that's why I believe Jesus says, have faith in God. That's what you need. It's what the apostles needed, and it's what we need today if we're going to overcome mere religion. God help us. Brother Ben, if you come and lead us